some idea. That's the first thought. That's never, ever let a rip, man.
Oh, no. I'm way too refined, Edwin. Way too refined. Behave the same way, Melbourne versus Sydney, houses versus units, all of those things. So again, we always believe in going granular. But I thought this was quite an interesting one from Domain that made the point that Sydney suburbs where unloved homes are getting more expensive. And they've made the point that more than half of property vendors in Sydney who can't get the price they want at auctions are setting their hopes even higher in their selling quest. And this is quite interesting. So some vendors at least, are still, thinking prices are going to go higher.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, because in a lot of areas, as I said, when we start looking at the markets, we've got over 630 suburbs in Sydney and growing, and 34 or 36 LGAs. So there's in those suburbs you've got different markets as well. You've got markets within markets. So when a lot of the time, I believe that. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about why Sydney stands alone in a continuation to last week's episode, last week's rant, and and we've already touched on some of the points, but we'll go into a little bit more detail later on. And this is why Sydney stands alone. Is you've got what we've got is, for me, I feel it's really more of a pullback of vendors' expectations than actual price drops, and because, as you know, there's a lot, different opinions, different trains of thought when it comes to the data that's given out, or these analysis or these reports are around it, are made up or come from. And we know that in the worst case scenario, the data is 72 days old. At best, it's 72 days old. Until it hits the Value General's office, you can't verify that a sale was a sale, and from a sale to from a transaction to settlement is 42 days, and from settlement to registration could be weeks. So we say it's about 72 days. Now, Domain has a closer finger on the pulse because of the back end information that has to get put onto the portals before it gets. But still, the reporters don't get that information because they still have to confirm certain information with it, so that way they don't go out with false figures if agents didn't put in the right figures on the back end and told little Furbies, because they're very trustworthy individuals. But they still got to check. So their data you could say it's about 30 days old, or 4 to 6 weeks old. So and if you look at the reports, they always go back about a month from where they get published on. So the data, there's a data lag. I feel that the truest form of data when it comes to understanding markets is the ones that you get on a daily basis, because at the end of the day, agents are using both Domain and real estate. So no matter which portal you use, if you start fixing your data sets or your number points into the areas, you'll actually see what's being listed and what's running currently. There are very, very few properties in the bigger pictures, in the grand scheme of things, that are not published. I mean, they're the ones that, as buyers agents, we chase, obviously. They're the ones that don't get put on the portals, and with Dusty and Evan, there's also some that get transacted off market through the WeChat channels as well. But that's a very low percentage in comparison to the majority of properties that actually get put on the portals. So this is why you got to be careful of the noise that's around and what's being said and how that translates. Look, for us, from our business point of view, and in the way that we help and assist our clients, well, we go along with the game. We play along with the emotional game because it benefits our clients, it benefits buyers. And if people are in a position to buy and they'll be looking at buying, well, in my opinion, my personal opinion, this is a great time to strike, because people, they're in an emotional quandary. They don't know which way to turn. They don't know which way to go. And agents, they feel that they're going to miss out on a commission if they don't. So they're pushing harder on their own client than they are on achieving the best price for their client, because they're trying to protect the wallet. And nobody can change my position on that. And this is where you take advantage of it. So moving on from that, it's, for me, what we're going to see mostly happen is a pullback in expectations rather than a pullback of what people are expecting to see in markets other than Melbourne. Melbourne stands alone, right? In many markets around Australia, we're going to see a pullback in vendors' expectations. Why? Because of, you already raised that point a bit earlier, and that is immigration. Immigration is high, and this the recent post by Ben Fordham and your earlier post on YouTube, hits home. See, this is what the WeChat chatter has been telling us as well. And this is where Dusty and Evan get their information from, the immigration lawyers and immigration agents that they've been dealing with. Even before they came into the real estate industry, they've been working in those law firms, and they're able to obtain this information firsthand. So when you've got this, Martin, when you've got this counters anything or part of, or the majority of any pullback from interest rate rises to an extent, from inflation, because then you're increasing demand. In a way, if you stopped immigration, well then, like I said, then we start getting serious about property drops. Then we start having a different discussion. But whilst construction and cost, as you also raised earlier on, of Reece raising their the piping, the PVC pipes and fittings by 30% up and upwards, and the cost of other materials, which we've already discussed, and transport costs and everything else add on to that, and you start piling onto renovation works, extension works, development works, construction works, anything of that nature, and that sort of pulls back because people can't fund it. And banks won't fund it because they're taking a different position. Because don't forget, at the end of the day, banks won't just fund it because the government says, hey, we need to build more. Banks are going to take a position as well and say, hold on a minute, shit, can you really pay? So the criteria to get the funding is going to be a lot higher in order to be able to get the funding. And then you've got to, if you want to start going high rise, which state governments and the federal government are pushing, the high rise,